It's story time. The sound of the radio kept me company as I navigated the road, its occasional static reminding me of my solitude. Then, out of nowhere, there was a sudden jolt. My car jerked, and it was evident that something was terribly wrong. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart racing. Upon stepping out of the car, I discovered a flat tire. A string of expletives escaped my lips. It was the last thing I needed, and the eerie silence of the night seemed to amplify my frustration. Just as I began to ponder my options, a voice broke through the stillness. "Need some help there?" I turned to see a figure emerging from the darkness. The stranger seemed to materialize out of thin air, and it sent a shiver down my spine. His features were obscured by shadows, but I could make out an old-fashioned outfit, something like a mechanic from a bygone era. His pale, translucent skin seemed to glow in the moonlight, and his eyes held a mournful depth. I stammered a response. Yeah, I've got a flat tire. Can you help me change it?" The man nodded and approached my car. He worked efficiently, his movements eerie yet mesmerizing. It was almost as if he was fixing the tire with some otherworldly expertise. I kept my distance but watched in a mix of awe and terror. The night felt even darker around him, like the very essence of light was drawn away. As he tightened the last lug nut, the stranger turned to me and smiled. His grin sent a chill down my spine. It was not the smile of a helpful stranger, but something more sinister, like he knew something I didn't. "Good as new," he said. "Just remember to be careful on these roads." I thanked him, climbed back into my car, and drove away. But as I glanced in my rearview mirror, the stranger had disappeared into the obsidian abyss. It wasn't until I arrived home that my mind truly began to unravel the mystery of that night. The encounter was too surreal to be ordinary, and the stranger's unsettling appearance haunted my thoughts. I decided to do some research. It didn't take long for me to stumble upon a local legend of a ghostly mechanic who roamed the very road where I'd had my eerie encounter. The story told of a man who'd met a tragic end while trying to help a stranded motorist. Now, his ghost would appear to travelers, fixing their vehicles and offering a warning about the treacherous road ahead. Doubt gnawed at me. Could the man I'd met that night truly be the spirit of the phantom mechanic? Or had my mind played tricks on me? It felt like my thoughts were spiraling into madness, and I couldn't find a rational explanation for what had occurred. But the story didn't end there. Strange events began to unfold in my life, things I couldn't explain. A sudden chill would grip the air, my car radio playing static-filled messages in a ghostly whisper, and sometimes I would catch a glimpse of that spectral mechanic in the rearview mirror, a shadowy figure grinning with malevolent glee. The encounters grew more frequent, and my nights became sleepless journeys through a waking nightmare. The more I learned about the legend, the deeper I fell into a chilling abyss of paranormal possibilities. Each time I saw the ghostly figure, he seemed less benevolent, and the darkness that clung to him grew thicker. I became obsessed with understanding the truth, my life unraveling as I sought answers. Was the ghost warning me, or was there a darker, sinister purpose behind his spectral appearances? My quest for answers led me down a terrifying path, haunted by the possibility that the phantom mechanic was not a benevolent spirit, but something far more malevolent. The nightmarish visions escalated, and it seemed the spectral figure had grown tired of his role as a friendly guide on the haunted road. He whispered ominous words, dark prophecies that kept me awake for nights on end. Shadows danced on the edge of my vision, and I could feel an ancient malevolence closing in. As the apparitions became more aggressive, my life unraveled completely. The specter of the ghostly mechanic had become a constant presence in my life, and it was no longer clear whether he was trying to save me or if I was being drawn into something far more sinister. One fateful night, I found myself back on that desolate road. I couldn't escape its sinister allure. The blackness was thick and heavy around me, and the sense of foreboding was palpable. It was then that the mechanic appeared once more, emerging from the darkness, his grin now a malevolent rictus. He spoke, his voice a sinister whisper that filled the night. "You have been chosen. The road calls, and it demands a price." I tried to flee, but my car wouldn't start. Panic coursed through me as the spectral figure drew closer, his cold, lifeless fingers closing around my throat. The last thing I heard was his haunting laughter as my vision faded to black. I awoke in a place of darkness, a realm of eternal night. The spectral mechanic stood before me, his grin now an eternally mocking expression. My existence had become intertwined with his, a tortured soul bound to a road that led only to despair. My encounters with the phantom mechanic were no longer warnings, but a sinister invitation into his cursed world. As I became one with the haunted road, I realized the terrible truth. I had become the ghostly figure, destined to roam the endless night, seeking travelers to help. And so, my friend, I share this story with you in the hope that it serves as a warning. Beware the desolate roads, for they may lead to encounters you can never escape, and know that some legends are born from very real, very malevolent forces that seek to consume your very soul. As a pastor, I'd always felt that the road home after evening service was a quiet, peaceful journey. The moon above and the empty stretch of road ahead served as my companions in the solitude of the night. But one fateful evening, my drive back would prove to be far from the ordinary. The clock had just struck midnight, and I was navigating the winding, desolate highway. The radio was off, leaving the sound of the wind rushing past as the only company to my thoughts. There was an eerie beauty to the moonlight, casting long, silhouetted shadows that stretched like bony fingers across the road. I couldn't help but feel the presence of something more than just the desolation of the night. It was as though an unseen veil separated me from the tangible world, and I was alone in the realm of spirits. The tires of my car suddenly screeched, and I braced myself for impact. The road ahead was clear, but my vehicle had veered to the side. As the car came to a halt, I knew something was wrong. Stepping out, I found a flat tire, its rubber shredded. A sense of unease prickled at the back of my neck, but I had no choice but to change the tire myself. I had hardly begun when I felt a presence behind me. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. The stranger moved with an eerie grace, like a shadow come to life. His pale, translucent skin seemed to glow under the moonlight, and his eyes held a mournful depth. I was taken aback, my heart pounding in my chest. It was not often that I encountered someone on this deserted road, let alone in the middle of the night. "Can I help you, my child?" I asked, my pastoral instincts taking over. The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he approached the car, his movements hypnotically graceful. I watched as he reached for the shredded tire, his fingers moving effortlessly. It was almost as if he was fixing the tire with an otherworldly expertise. But as he worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that this man was no ordinary traveler. His features, obscured by shadows, seemed to shift, as though he were a specter. An otherworldly chill filled the air around us, and the haunting silence was broken only by the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. The stranger tightened the last lug nut. It was then that I noticed his smile. It sent a shiver down my spine, for it was not the smile of a helpful stranger, but something far more sinister. It was a smile that seemed to say, "I know something you don't." "Your tire is fixed," he said, his voice a whisper that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Be on your way." I thanked him, climbed back into my car, and began to drive away. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I could see the stranger standing on the darkened highway, his figure fading into the abyss. The encounter was surreal, an enigma that had no place in my world of faith and reason. It gnawed at my thoughts, refusing to be rationalized. This was a story I couldn't share with my congregation, and yet it haunted me. As weeks passed, I began to see the stranger more frequently, his appearance more malevolent with each encounter. He was no longer the benevolent helper, but a figure of sinister intent. His spectral form appeared in my dreams, whispering cryptic words, dark prophecies that left me sleepless for nights on end. One evening, I returned to the highway in search of answers. The moon was a pale crescent in the sky, and I could feel the presence of the spectral figure before I saw him. He emerged from the darkness, his grin now a malevolent rictus. "You have been chosen," he said, his voice a haunting whisper. "The road calls, and it demands a price." I attempted to flee, but my car remained immobile. Panic surged through me as the spectral figure closed the distance between us. His grip was icy, his fingers closing around my throat. The last thing I heard was his haunting laughter as the world around me faded to black. I awoke in a place of eternal night, a realm of darkness without end. The spectral stranger stood before me, his grin now eternally mocking. My existence had become irrevocably linked to his, a tortured soul bound to the highway he roamed. My mind was consumed by his dark prophecies, and the line between dreams and reality blurred. I had become an unwilling passenger on the highway of the dead, forever marked by that otherworldly encounter. Losing one's way on a lonely highway at night can be a disorienting experience. It was a chilly autumn evening when I found myself in such a situation, with only the company of the endless road and my car's dim headlights. I had decided to take a road less traveled on my journey back from a business conference, guided by a map that had seen better days. My misinterpretation of the map's scribbled directions led me down a desolate stretch of highway. The full moon cast eerie shadows upon the road, making the situation all the more unsettling. My cell phone had lost signal hours ago, and with no other travelers in sight, I felt a sense of isolation that bordered on dread. Then, as though a beacon of hope in the darkness, a faint, flickering light appeared in the distance. As I drew nearer, I realized it was the dim glow of a neon sign, casting an ethereal green light that painted the road with an eerie glow. Pulling into the gravel lot of the small, run-down gas station, I couldn't help but think that my luck had finally turned. I parked my car next to a rusted old pump and made my way to the entrance. The gas station was a time capsule, reminiscent of a bygone era. Peeling paint and cracked windows greeted me as I stepped inside, where I was met with a musty smell that hinted at decades of disuse. The sole source of illumination was the flickering neon sign, casting a pulsating light that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. At the counter, an old radio sputtered to life, its distorted sound filling the air with static and disembodied voices. As I approached the counter, I noticed a collection of dated candy and snacks, their wrappers faded with age. They looked as though they had been untouched for years. "Hello. Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing through the silence. My words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before dissipating into the darkness. My curiosity got the best of me as I explored the dimly lit aisles of the store, the flickering neon casting dancing shadows on the worn linoleum floor. It was then that I noticed an old, tarnished bell hanging from the door. Its tarnished surface was etched with a date, October 3rd, 1963. My unease grew as I stepped back outside. The flickering neon sign cast ghostly light upon the rusted gas pumps, and as I checked the pump, I found a layer of dust and cobwebs covering the decrepit machinery. It hadn't seen use in decades. Confusion and dread gnawed at my thoughts. If this gas station had been abandoned for so long, why was the neon sign still lit, as if it were clinging to life in the heart of the night. Unable to make sense of the situation, I decided to press on with my journey, hoping to find a more populated area and seeking directions to my destination. The unsettling encounter with the forgotten gas station seemed like a mere blip on my path, a strange memory I could later share with friends. As I continued down the highway, my GPS reacquired a signal, guiding me to a nearby town. I reached my destination without further incident, and my business meeting went as planned. It wasn't until the next evening, as I settled into my hotel room, that I remembered the eerie gas station. I decided to look it up on the internet, thinking I might find a quirky piece of local history. What I discovered sent shivers down my spine. The search results told a chilling story. The gas station I had visited the night before had indeed existed, but it had caught fire and burned to the ground over 3 years ago. The news articles described the blaze, the cause of which was never determined, and how the gas station had been a total loss. It couldn't have been the same gas station I'd visited. The neon sign had still been lit, and the interior had shown no sign of fire damage. I couldn't find any recent reports of a reconstruction, no evidence that the gas station had been rebuilt. Dread coursed through me as I considered the implications of my discovery. I had encountered an abandoned, decaying structure on that desolate highway, a gas station that shouldn't have existed. A sense of unreality washed over me, the ghostly neon sign and the strange, dated objects within the store, all haunting my thoughts. Had I stumbled upon a place out of time, a portal to another era? Or had I unwittingly crossed into a realm where the past bled into the present? As I lay in my hotel bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had taken root within me. That abandoned gas station had been a place where the past and the present merged, and the implications of my encounter left me questioning the boundaries of reality and the mysteries that linger in the shadows of the night.